This is the You Winning Life podcast, your number one source for mastering a positive existence. Each episode will be interviewing exceptional people, giving you empowering insights, and guiding you to extraordinary outcomes. Learn from specialists in the worlds of integrative and natural wellness, spirituality, psychology, and entrepreneurship, so you too can be winning life. Now, here's your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified neuro-emotional technique practitioner, and certified entrepreneur coach, Jason Wasser.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the You Winning Life podcast. As always, if you are getting any value out of our episodes, please do me a favor and follow us on Instagram, You Winning Life, or Jason Wasser, LMFT. Most of the stuff now is on my main one, Jason Wasser, LMFT. And also, please subscribe and share out the episodes if you think anybody else would benefit from it. Today's guest is Juan Luis Betancourt. He is CEO with really amazing background. He has worked for companies such as Procter & Gamble, Reebok, Puma, and Decathlon. He has a MBA from the Wharton School, an MA in International Management from the Lauder Institute, both at University of Pennsylvania, and a bachelor's degree in economics from Harvard University. Juan Luis is also the board member of the Miami Theater Center and on the Wharton and Harvard Alumni Association in South Florida. He is now the CEO and founder of Human Intelligence, which takes AI, tech, and psychological assessments to help businesses, companies, and teams work better from a deeper understanding of how to collaborate and understand the motivations and insights of partnership, team collaboration, and leadership. Juan, welcome to the show. So, all right. So very much, as you guys heard, excited to be hanging out with Juan, and we're just going to go right for the jugular because he and I just had a massively intense and amazing conversation, pre-gaming everything, and I want to give a caveat heads up because he and I were just debating this, that some people hear topics in the first few minutes of a podcast and they shut it off and they become disinterested. And what I want to challenge everybody is that Juan is going to share an incredibly important part of himself, part of his background, part of his culture, part of what inspires him to be and do what he is and what he is doing now, and how right off the bat we may not see the relevancy to the impact that it can have on the greater conversation. So I challenge you for the first 5 to 10 minutes of this conversation, not to be disinterested, not to fast forward, and not to shut off the episode. But Juan, first of all, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thanks, Jason, for having me.
So you and I have gotten to know each other more than a little, but not as much as we both would like over the last 2 months. And what we were just talking about is what's going on in the world, obviously, with Hamas and the terrorism in Israel and the war that has been happening. And we were talking about the shared atrocities in the world that people turned a blind eye to. And you started talking about your Cuban background. So, you shared this idea that people, either A, turn a blind eye or are very quick to forget about things. And I'd love to start off the conversation with why that topic is so important and impactful to you.
Yeah, so I am Cuban American. Both my parents are from Cuba, left during 1960 when Fidel Castro took power. And, in a way, I relate to the Israeli situation where people want others to speak up. And I see the frustration when people don't for Israelis and Jews, because similarly, when Cuba, which was a flourishing country, largest middle class in the world, they had trains before the U.S. by, I think, about 7 years. They had air conditioning before the U.S. I mean, it was a very wealthy country. Nobody was leaving Cuba for the U.S., let's put it that way, for 400 years, from 1508 to 1960. We're talking 400 years. There's no documentation of any poor middle class or rich person coming to Cuba, to the U.S. to live a better life, right? They would come and do business, but go back to Cuba. One man, Batista, the president at the time in 59, was a corrupt guy and bringing the mafia to Cuba. And so the rich, basically, Fidel Castro was part of the rich class, said, let's get rid of this guy. And they all financed Fidel Castro. The rich did, not communists, the rich, my family included, and almost every rich Cuban family that left, financed him to do a revolution to get rid of the dictator, Batista. Unfortunately, we didn't know that Fidel had other plans. And the minute he took power, he killed 3 of the 4 generals who won all the battles. He put 50,000 people in jail, and he killed over 15,000 people. So similar to, Israel losing 1,500 people just in the initial attack from Hamas, Fidel Castro in literally a week did more damage than that to his own country. And it's tantamount not only of killing your own people and putting them in jail, he also then changed the system of a capitalistic, wonderful society with a middle class and highly educated, right? If you lived in Latin America and Mexico, Argentina, and Brazil, you went to medical school in Havana, you went to law school in Havana, you would never go anywhere else. You would go to Cuba for education. That's not the case today. And so this is a great society. And all of a sudden one guy kills all these people. And imagine if Bibi Netanyahu says, hey, everyone, I'm now Hamas, and we're going to make the Jews Muslim. Like,
right.
That would be crazy. Well, that's what happened. And no one in the world even lifted a finger. And worse, when all the educated children of these families left Cuba, went to go invade Cuba with U.S. support, John F. Kennedy, who in the U.S. perspective is a great leader, among Cubans, they can't stand them because he said he would help and give air cover. That way no American lives would be lost. And he pulled out last minute with 20,000 Cuban citizens who've been training for 6-7 years. They're all PhD doctors, the most educated people in the world, left on the beach to get slaughtered and put in jail for the next 40 years, right? And did anybody in the U.S. care? So to this day, nobody cares about that Cuban story. Nobody cares about what was the greatest country for 350 years. Nobody cares. And it helps me put in perspective the Israeli situation and the Hamas situation and the Palestinian context to not say things without learning more, without understanding, because culture and ethnicities and history, the world's a big place, and there's over 250 countries, probably 10,000 tribes in those countries. I don't know much about all of them, and it saddens me that not everybody knows enough about things outside their own country, let alone Israel or Cuba or Rwanda or Bagan and all these other places.
Yeah. And I know that, like, just from a psychological perspective, how people choose not to. No, they choose to turn a blind eye. And we're seeing this, like, and whatever it may be, right? Where whether what's going on is not only turning a blind eye, but also justifying evil, justifying these things, whether it's about money, whether it's about politics, right? Whether it's like, oh, I agree with like some things that they may believe, but therefore I'm going to excuse everything else. I see this becoming a universal, we see this in society, like with cancel culture and with everything else. And as you and I talked about, like I'm a card carrying Democrat, but yet you and I, right? You and I both look at every single, news website. We look at things from different perspectives. We read books of people we disagree with. That's a lost art. That's a lost way to have conversations.
How many people can say they voted for both Democrat and Republican in their life?
Me, you.
I've done that.
Right?
And somehow whenever I meet other people who've done that, I get along a lot better with them because they seem more open-minded to talking about different perspectives. I don't agree with all of my friends on politics, but I can listen to them and agree to disagree. And that art has been lost. And that's why we're in such a bad situation, not only in the US, but globally.
Right. And now taking this as an inspiration for what you're doing professionally. I mean, coming from your story as of Cuban background and the immigrant family story. And by all means, your story is truly, a success story in so many regards. And not only that, right, from the academic side, from the business side, having a family, right, being involved in charitable organizations and having influence on other people's lives. This idea of like talking about what we're talking about, like with leadership that took over to destroy, and you making a mission in your life to have leadership to uplift and connect has become a central part of what you've been trying to create, especially with your newest venture, Human Intelligence.
Yeah, I after 25 years working, quote, to make money, to get to the right titles, my career took a change or a turn to be really purpose-based and driven through energy from spirituality. And we've talked about it in the past, but, I no longer was beholden to companies, and I launched my own company, and I could explore other things such as a modality of meditation that the U.S. government through the Supreme Court made legal in 2006 called ayahuasca. It's a way of they call under the freedom of religion. It's a way of deep meditation. It's misunderstood by many, but it's actually a legal experience that's kind of a form of spirituality and religion to the U.S. government, where you can access, like through meditation, higher consciousness and understanding about yourself, others, and the way the world works. And so through that, I launched Human Intelligence to give back to the world and to help the world connect, and for every person to be more self-aware, every person to be more emotionally intelligent, to connect with others, and to do it in the place where that's lost, which is the workplace. Especially now in a distributed workplace, Human Intelligence helps people connect and collaborate, and be more productive, where everyone's more engaged and happy, and we reduce friction from writing emails to being in meetings, and it makes work more enjoyable when you're able to do that. And we're leading the charge in that and being really innovative around how we do that.
Let's take just another few minutes on what that looks like, because I got to see the back end. You've been gracious enough to allow me to use it and to start using it with some of my clients. And you and I talked about different like personality tests and lenses, and my love of the Enneagram personality style. When someone is, and the beauty of what you've created can be now eventually, hopefully, which is part of our conversations, how it could be applied to other scenarios outside of the entrepreneur and business world. But I just want people to understand a little bit more of what you're trying to do and the tools you're using when that's happening through this platform.
Elaborate on that question, please.
So people are coming in using Human Intelligence. Companies are using this, right? And there's assessments, there's tests, there's interactive when you're on a Zoom call, there's ways of communicating, right? There's icons and emojis and reminders.
Oh, so some of the use cases.
Yeah, the use cases and some of the ways that, like, right, because it's a tech company, it's using psychology, right? These are very generic, right? So let's go a little bit deeper. Like, so if the average company.
Okay, so I'll give you the conceptual description and then the actual use case.
Beautiful.
So conceptually, we go to market and say, we have taken an industry of 50 years called psychometric tools or psychometric personality assessments. So picture predictive index, strength finders, Berkman, Caliper, Hogan, SHL. There's all these battery of personality tests. The problem with the $3 billion spent on those tools up until now is you take it, you do a workshop with your team or with a coach or psychologist, and it's a one and done, and you never really think about it again. And even if you do remember everything, those are the 10 people. It's not the 5,000 other people in your company you're working with. Right. And so that's been a problem. And so what we did was we took an assessment tool with technology and APIs. We embedded it in all of your workflows and all of your current collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams, Outlook, G Suite, Slack, Zoom, and then sprinkled on it now with AI. So the following could happen. Like Grammarly, which did not come up with anything new in terms of content. They did not invent the thesaurus or the dictionary or how to write better. And there are millions of teachers of grammar and English around the world. All Grammarly did to become a $15 billion company was put those insights and that content where it matters, where you need it at the time of need, in your workflow, in the email, in the Word doc. We did the same with psychometric. So you take our test, give it to 5,000 people. So you send a link to 5,000 employees, for example, at Coca-Cola uses it on a Monday. And when they open up their Outlook, one use case is they open up an email. And if I'm writing to you, Jason, I've never met you, and I'm asking for a proposal for your approval or for a budget, I will click a button in my email as I'm writing, and it will suggest how to write the email better for you. If I'm very conceptual and high level and decisive, I might be putting on you a way of communicating that you could be detail oriented and deliberate that you might not like. So completely opposite for me. This will suggest new ways. In our AI version of that, all I do is write my email, push a button, and it gets rewritten for Jason the way he likes to read information. So in one button, it helps emails get rewritten the right way. 38% of emails today are misread, misunderstood, cause friction, and you lose $20,000 a year from that. We fix that problem. A second use case, you're in a virtual meeting, and it'll tell you you're doing training. It'll tell you how the group likes to learn. Or if one person likes to learn by pushing back and challenging with questions, you won't take that the wrong way. You'll see that individual that's just how they learn. They want to ask questions. You might also see that one person might like to do self-study versus others who like to work team, and you might do a breakout that way. If you're in a meeting and you need to influence somebody, it'll tell you that person is deliberate and you're decisive. You might not want to push them on making a decision that meeting. At the end, ask them if they want to get back to you at the end. Many examples of that. You can go into a meet every Monday. You get a meeting, a list of your meetings 2 days later, and on Tuesday, 2 days later, and it'll say, hey, here are your 5 meetings. And it'll present to you those meetings. And you click on one of those meetings in your calendar. It'll tell you the dynamics of that meeting and how to run that meeting better. Or that somebody might not speak up because they're shy and reflective. So how to be more inclusive and make those people feel like they belong. All of this at your fingertips as you're working. So it's mindless. You don't think about it. It just happens and it's part of your workflow. And like Grammarly is changing the world to write better. We're changing the world to collaborate and be more emotionally intelligent and happier.
Every single use case is like, I'm looking at it as a therapist, right? So we're talking about emails and how many people in conversations of text, right, are getting lost in translation, and fights are happening, and right, relationships are being broken up because someone read a text wrong, or there wasn't the right emoji, or Correct. There wasn't the right inflection, and like, or it's not responded to timely enough, right? And then take that on a corporate level where not only just emotions are being hurt, but billions of dollars of productivity can be lost and gained, right, within the wrong interpretation of an email. And I see how profound this can be. And I also like, as you're talking about this, right, you're looking at like the 5 love languages. That's just another personality index. And it's not like, oh, well, I understand myself. It's what's really not only amazing for what you're doing is to help people understand themselves, but also how do you interact with someone else based on their lens of seeing the world.
Correct.
When you're saying that person is challenging, right? To see that person like, oh, they're not being an asshole. This is their way of showing that they're invested in this. This is their way of making sure that they know that they're doing it the best that they can by asking questions. And you may be like, oh, well, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to take this personally that you don't like my ideas, or that you want to ask more questions. And you think maybe, you might have that self-doubt and you're being challenged by it. No. That person just wants to make sure that they're doing the right, to understand. And I think that's what's so amazing about what you guys are doing and creating. And when I took my exam, right, my assessment, just as a cool, just so you know this, right? So when you're talking about like having it pop up on the screen, I want people to understand that there's like pictures of like different styles of like personalities. So you have like the maverick personality, which is like an air pilot, right? With their really cool glasses and goggles, right? So I came up as 48% maverick, 31% creative, and there's a person drawing a painting.
And there are mine. I just put on the camera.
Oh, okay, cool. So, right, so I have to figure out how to. Okay, Maverick and so you have the architect and the helper, right? And I got the promoter, which is so interesting because I realized that when I find something that I love that makes my life healthier and happier, I want to share that with the world. And I also feel that, like, even this podcast, what I said to you before we started was, don't be shy and think that you talking about your company. I want you to promote this because this is something I believe in. So this is not shameless for me. It's not like shameless promotion. This is anybody who I'm sharing time with. I want them to get their word out. So it's interesting how impactful that is as a maverick creative and as a promoter, especially when you're, being a maverick in creative ways. Right. So that aligns with me. And you have the maverick, the architect. So the structure of creating things, putting things together, and then using that to help people is really, really powerful. And like, that's what's so cool about this, right? People, if you're watching this on the video, you'll see Juan's, avatars on the left of the screen. And that can remind you how to talk to him, how to connect with him, and how to hear his words more impactfully. So that's like, it's fascinating.
At the end of the day, you can't have human connection without understanding each other first. And so we help you understand yourself. We help you understand others. And then the magic happens.
Yeah.
That's where human connection in life happens. At work, we focus it on collaborating because we don't want human connection for dating at work. We want human connection for collaborating. But this tool can be applied in all senses, even outside of work, for families and for relationships and, patient care. We sell to hospitals to the chief patient care officer and customer experience and patient experience. Because when all your employees are working better together without friction and people are not misunderstanding emails from one department to another, you're not cutting off the wrong leg and doing surgery on the wrong leg. You're not giving the wrong medicine. Patients aren't seeing nurses fighting. And so patient experience gets better. I mean, imagine the day you can order an Uber and pick a driver that you're really going to enjoy. right? If you don't want the driver speaking, you can pick that, right? So connection from Uber drivers to, I've had to find nannies, and I had to meet 20 nannies to find one that my wife and I both like. And so all of this is around human connection. It's what makes the world and our experience in it goes around, and we help with that.
Yeah. And I know I have a client that personally left a job in a hospital system because they weren't getting and able to have that influence and impact, and weren't getting that reciprocal, that what they hoped that the department would be at by now before they even walked in the door. They weren't getting the, hey, let me allow you to get there. And because of that and that conflict in a system, this person left and quit their job. And it's a shame because this person is such a passionate person. Right. And when we were talking about the idea of like money being wasted.
What you said about that person. Yeah. I don't know how young they are, but what you just said is the biggest challenge to corporations today. Right. Gen Z's, millennials, 64% are looking to leave because they're not engaged and they're not connecting with their bosses and they're not connecting with the company. And there's this lack of connection. And those Gen Zs and millennials are the future leaders of companies, and companies have their hands tied. They don't understand how to connect. This would go a long way to help with that group of people.
Right. And it makes so much sense because one of the things you and I were talking about is how much money is being wasted about culture in company. So I want to touch a little bit on that, right? Because I know you really do have your finger on that pulse of that, and you've been in corporate America and you've been working with some major companies. But let's talk a little bit about that because, like you said, you may have 15 people doing this, but it hasn't trickled down effect. Or, you might have a boss who's reading, any of the wonderful leadership books by John Maxwell, but it's like, but the buck stops there and no one else is really getting on the same page. Like they may give their team, oh, I want you to read this John Maxwell book, but then there's no accountability and things created around it. So when you're saying like culture in companies is wasting money, and enhance a little bit of that from your perspective.
Yeah, for the last 20, 30 years, all the HBR articles and all the thought leadership around culture had this belief that culture is monolithic, that every company has one culture, built to last. What's the culture right? And, there's a guy at Harvard Business School who went to MIT. His name's Don Sull, Sull. Go look up his research. He's at Culture Index now and on the side from his academic publications. He looked at the Fortune 500, what they say are their values / their culture online. And then he did surveys of all the employees at those companies, enough to be statistically significant. And he found that, first of all, 90% of the Fortune 500 have 4 of the 5 same cultural values. So there's no way that 90% of companies have the same culture, just off the bat.
Right.
So it's ludicrous.
But what they claim their core values to be is very different.
Well, most people claim their core values to be their culture.
Right.
And most state 5, that's usually
right.
4 of the 5 are the same for 90% of the companies in the Fortune 500, whether it's industrial, manufacturing, retail, Google, they're all agile. They're all customer oriented. I mean, it's all top down CEO and board saying what looks good. Let's put it on the website and make people memorize it. And if they can say it, that means that's our culture. Right.
Right.
And then they have turnover, unengaged people, and they're trying to manage to that when people aren't that. Right. Second thing that Don Sull found was when they surveyed people at those 500 companies, they found that there's zero correlation in those 5 values at every one of those companies, meaning the companies think that that's what their culture is, but the employees don't think that those companies live any of those things. It's the most it came out a year ago, this massive study, and it was laughable because I've been saying that now for 7 years with human intelligence. We have the data on so many companies. The reality is culture is not top down. Culture is not monolithic. You don't have the same culture at Coca-Cola USA as Coca-Cola Brazil, Coca-Cola China, right? And even at Starbucks, you don't have the same culture and the same job and the same barista role. And what leads to a culture performance in Hialeah, where they're all Hispanic or Latin, Spanish-speaking people with Spanish-speaking customers, the culture of performance there is the customer service person, the barista. They're going to come out from behind the counter. They're going to grab people's babies, kiss them, squeeze their cheeks of strangers, complete strangers, talk for 30 minutes, ask personal questions. And it's a 35-minute experience to get your cafe latte. And it's awesome customer service, and their net promoter score is high. And they are the best performing store in Starbucks in South Florida. You take that same group of baristas, those 6 people, and put them in Battery Park in New York City where the people are going off to Wall Street and they want a 1-minute experience. They don't want to talk to you and they don't want any kind of connection.
They want
want
efficiency.
Their kids. They want efficiency. They want quick.
Yeah.
That high performing culture versus in Miami and Hialeah versus Battery Park would fail miserably and vice versa. And so it's ludicrous to say companies have one culture. It's even within the same job in the same company. And then companies spend millions of dollars on culture temperament studies. Are our employees happy or not? And they used to do it annually. Then it was like every 6 months, biannually, and then it was monthly. And now it's almost like these pulse surveys every week. Oh my God, they're going down the wrong rabbit hole. That is such a waste of time and energy. You could have 100% of people loving the company, getting paid tons of money per hour, the best paid people. They think the company's the best ever. They'll recommend to a friend and everybody thinks the company's awesome. And if it's a customer service oriented company in retail and they're the best paid retail employees and associates, but you actually don't have people who are customer oriented and all they do is care about making money, that company will lose all their sales, all their customers, they'll never come back, and they will go out of business despite having high engagement survey results. And the best example is Microsoft and Apple have completely different true cultures. However, the engagement survey that they use is the same one, and they actually have the same exact results, saying that 80% are really engaged, love their company, 10% somewhat, and 10% they hate the company, thought it was different. That doesn't mean they have the same culture, okay? An engagement survey, happiness does not lead to performance. Okay, companies are so worried about the happiness of their employees, they're missing the need to understand what we measure at Human Intelligence. For instance, are we a group of mavericks? Do we have, we worked with a restaurant up in Minnesota, 300 people, was like the biggest restaurant in the city. It was like a Chuck E. Cheese or a Cheesecake Factory. And they were the best paid waiters and waitresses in the city. Yet their Yelp was 1 star. They would never get repeat business. People wouldn't come because they paid people really well. Those employees loved it. And all their temperament studies, they were a great employer. The employees loved it. They were getting paid a ton of money. They wanted to work there. But they were finding people who only care about making money, who are not service oriented. And so they were managing to the wrong thing. They came in with our tool and they said, we only want to hire people who are service-oriented, sense of belonging, to create a culture of belonging, and who don't care about money, okay, and who are problem solvers. Because you want a waiter, if you say, oh, can you take the ketchup on the side, or can you want someone to go back and ask and not just know just whatever's on the menu, right? So service-oriented and problem solvers. That was what they said. So they used our tool to hire. Within 2 months, their Yelp scores went to 3 stars. Within 6 months, they went to 5 stars. They put out 2 other restaurants out of business. It is now the #1 restaurant in that city using our tool because they were measuring with temperament surveys the wrong things, and with our survey and assessment the right things. We want service-oriented problem solvers, not people who just want to get paid good money and say that they're happy at our company.
What's so cool about that, and then like taking it back into different aspects of companies, or is that those will be the things that you're looking for in the direct to consumer, right, to the customer facing side. Now you have the back end. You might have a chef that might need different traits, right? And then you have the management team that might need different traits. So it's not like this, like people think about like culture as like this one size fits all, and therefore we all need to fit into like, that bubble. But
every role at a company will have a different culture, and every part of the world where that role exists will have a different culture of performance. And now there's technology and there's tools like Human Intelligence actually that can answer that question. What is the culture of performance for this group, this team, this division? What is a culture of diversity of thought? How can we guarantee culture add and not continue to hire more of the same? Most clients we have are shocked that their teams are lopsided with everyone who reflects the leader and looks and feels like the leader. And it's a vicious cycle, because when you have 5 people now who reflect the leader, let's say they're all decisive and self-starters. Well, when you bring up when the person does the interview who's not a self-starter, who's not decisive, they're going to be like, oh no, that person sucked. Well, because they don't think and act like you. That doesn't mean they suck. You actually need someone to balance the team.
Right.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that people keep hiring who they like, not who's going to add more problem solving and make a team more agile, more innovative.
And I think that's what, like, when we throw out these buzzwords, right? The agile, right? Again, like how many of those companies use that word, right? And their thing, right? And looking at it like from working with families and couples, and even working with my entrepreneur families or my businesses, these things still apply to basic relationship dynamics at home, right? You're a father, you're a husband, you're not just an entrepreneur, right? And what would it be? What would it look like to have an agile marriage? What would it look like to have a agile parenting style, right? But what about taking into consideration your wife's personality and dispositions, your children's personality and dispositions, and how this is so universally
you
powerful.
Just nailed it. The best parents will bring up child A, child B, child C differently, because child A, child B, child C need different ways of being managed, of being incentivized, being motivated, of being nourished. Just like a boss, a leader needs to manage every employee differently. Every employee needs, and when I was promoted to Procter & Gamble, I mean, they knocked into my head, like, Juan, now that you're the boss, now that you're a brand manager, you have 5 people reporting to you, it gets exponentially more difficult. I go, why? Now I have a budget. I can tell people what to do. They're like, no, you've already missed the point. Now you need to change, because before bosses were changing for you, you didn't know it, the good ones. Now you need to change for every subordinate you have. You need to learn to listen differently, to motivate differently, and to act differently for every subordinate. That's what makes a great leader, and that's what makes great management. And it kind of hit me in the face. I'm like, oh, that sucks. I have to change for everybody else, even though I'm the boss. Ego goes down, service goes up. Parents need to learn that same lesson. And it's a challenge, because that means being agile. And a tool like ours helps you understand that for an individual, for a team, for a group. But most people don't have tools like ours, and most companies aren't like Procter & Gamble.
So I know we have a hard stop in 2 minutes. So my last question before, obviously, we throw out all the ways in which people can connect with you. And obviously, this is part 1 of hopefully, continued conversations, is what right now are you reading or listening to that you are getting a lot of value from, that you would love other people to like kind of put in front of their eyes and listen to and hear, and that's impacting you and uplifting you and informing you to be a more complete human being?
So I'm going to take a different tact here,
please,
and not do a business thing, although this will help everyone with their business. It will help everyone with
doesn't have to be business. Yeah.
Perfect. So 3 things. Everyone should read a book called Journey of Souls. Get past page 30, because up until 30, you're going to be like, this is crazy woo-woo magic. After page 30, you'll see why I'm recommending this book. I've read a lot of books in my life. There's no greater book to teach you about life and why we're here than that book. And it also explains your relationships with every person in your life. So Journey of Souls, buy that book. Don't buy version 2 or 3, part 2, 3. Just buy the one that was done in 1990. So that's 1. 2, learn about a guy named Joe Dispenza.
Yep. Love Joe.
I think it's a good first step into the connection of being the best version of yourself with spirituality in a way that's not kind of scary, offensive, or weird. So Joe Dispenza, learn about this person. And then 3rd, learn about ayahuasca. Not as something to fix people, but something to get to whatever next level you as an individual need to get to, because this is the greatest tool that the universe put on this planet for self-development, for consciousness, for understanding, and to reduce that voice in your head, which is not your friend, which is an ego voice that lives in fear and scarcity. This will be able to give you the ability to live in pure abundance, joy and happiness at a high vibration. Not all the time. I'm not.
We're still human.
But we're still human, but much more often than anybody else who's never done ayahuasca.
Love it. To be continued.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason, so much for having me today.
We will absolutely. Everybody else, please check out humanintelligence.com if we're going to put all the notes in the link, and how to reach out to Juan if you have any questions about how to connect with the company. And again, Juan, thank you so much. And very much looking forward to our online and offline conversations in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thanks, brother. We'll talk soon. Feel good.
Thanks for listening to the You Winning Life podcast. If you are ready to minimize your personal and professional struggles and maximize your potential, we would love it if you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Jason Wasser, LMFT.